Certainty is way overrated. This is a t-shirt of somebody that I happened to run into in the coffee shop this week. I would say it's bold, but honestly, I disagree. And I really didn't get into some conversation with this individual, by the way, about it. I thought, hey, if you're bold enough to wear this, I'm certainly not going to interrupt that boldness. But I think Doubting Thomas would also probably disagree with this. I think most of the disciples during these 40 days after Jesus came alive in their imaginations and in their world till when Jesus was gone permanently, certainty is overrated. Especially when it comes to faith and other imponderables. I don't know how many of you know the Most Reverend Justin Welby. I'm not sure why he's the most reverend, but I guess that's in comparison to other reverends. He is the most Reverend Welby, Archbishop of Canterbury. He's the leader of about 80 million Anglicans worldwide. He recently stated, "Is there a God? And where is God?" The International Business Times called it the doubt of the century. Archbishop Welby's admission had not just raised a few eyebrows, but sparked concerns if the leader of the Church of England would actually one day renounce Christianity and spirituality as a whole with those kind of statements. There was another journalist that was writing for the magazine Atheist Today and said, excitedly, "Atheism is on the rise, and it appears as though even those at the top of the church are beginning to have their doubts." When asked if he harbored doubts, the Archbishop said, "That's really a good question." He said, "The other day, I was praying over something as I was running, and I ended up saying to God, 'Look, this is all very well, but isn't it about time you did something if you're there?'" The Daily Show account joked, Archbishop of Canterbury admits doubts about the existence of God and then adds, "But atheism doesn't pay the bills." But I think his candor, in a sense, only makes him more human. During our Easter celebration last week, as we were putting our butterflies on the forgiveness tree, several individuals leaned over to me as I was sitting right here as the band or Sugar Thieves were singing and playing "God's Gonna Trouble the Water," and they said, "So Pastor, when is God gonna trouble the water? We're singing it, but when is God gonna actually trouble the water? When is God gonna step into our current reality, our current scene in America and across the globe, and when is God gonna trouble the water?" I didn't think it was necessarily the time to probably get into a dialogue at that point, but they had a valid concern. Where is God? Where is God in the middle of our current America as we have watched justice and human rights being chiseled away and hammered away at bit by bit by bit, one day, more losses around justice? Where was God in the middle of the loss of their teacher, their rabbi, and their friend with the disciples those 2,000 years ago? What do you do when hope is gone? What do you do when it seems that death, evil, disappointment, failure, illness, and injustice has won? I think certainty is overrated. When I was in my second year of seminary, I was so absolutely sure, I was absolutely certain that the theology I was studying was the right theology. It was right, and I did believe everybody else that didn't hold my theology was wrong. But after my year of internship, or what we call vicarage or student pastoring, as campus pastor at Northeast Missouri State in Kirksville, Missouri, and I said Missouri correctly for those of you who are from Missouri. After working in that academic setting with students from the U, my perfect theology framework started to crumble. And finally, after serving as 4 years of campus pastor, when I finally finished seminary, At the University of Nebraska, go Big Red, I also was the chaplain for the football team, which is a little-known secret, which was very exciting for me. And finally, after 18 months in Siberia, all that systematic theology, yeah, Siberia did it. All that theology and all that systematic understanding of God was beginning to crumble pretty much big time. And I allowed myself to have my doubts. I allowed myself to live into the hard questions and actually left the pastoral ministry because you don't want a pastor standing up here preaching what they don't believe. So I spent 5 years floundering, 5 years hurting, 5 years being beat up by organized religion, by the way, and I claimed myself to be an agnostic. I honestly didn't know anymore if there was really a God, or if there was a God, I wasn't sure that God even cared. In the end, I must admit, I found a very different God than my first 2 years of seminary. I found a bigger God. I found a God that was bigger than my doubts and bigger than my uncertainty. I found a God that was bigger than my small theology, which could be contained in 3 volumes of Pieper's Systematics doctrine, about this thick. I found a God that would journey with me into the places of doubt and fear and unknowingness. And Voltaire says this: doubt is not a pleasant condition, but certainty is absurd. And the longer I've lived and the longer I've journeyed into this Christian faith life, I have found that to be true. So during these next few weeks, or 40 days to be exact, because it seems like 40 days are really a significant number in the scriptures, I'm going to focus on the Jesus community and characters in the community during this in-between time after Jesus rose and after Jesus rises again and is gone. It's this time when Jesus mystically appears, and it seems the disciples have visions and dreams in the middle of all this loss in their community. It's what I like to call, and the Celts call this, the Celtic community says, it's like a thin place. So I think for these next 40 days, I'd like you to journey with me into thin places. And I think this place of uncertainty and doubt is a thin place. So death is the final scene for most of us. We know that we cannot get out of life alive, correct? Death is the final, it's kind of the end game. And maybe that is why when Jesus returns in the way Jesus returns after his death, it was so incredibly frightening for the disciples. Because they understood death the same way we understand death. In fact, half of the Jews believed in a resurrection from the dead, and half of the Jews did not believe in a resurrection from the dead. So this was really difficult for them to understand. The powers exerted to put Jesus to death had lost. And yet Jesus was appearing, even if it was just in their imaginations. Who then, I think they were asking, holds the power of the ultimate end? Who holds the power of death? And frightened and uncertain, as Teresa read the scripture for us today, they locked themselves away, hoping their lives were safe and sound within their homes. For me, when life disappoints, when I am feeling overwhelmed and hopeless, when I'm feeling lost, confused, I go to my safe place, under the covers in my bed. It's that come to Jesus moment of panic and fear. I think the followers of the way, they find this moment for themselves, this come to Jesus moment, if you will, but they're behind closed doors, huddled, locked away, fearing what may be next, that their lives may also be on the chopping block or on the cross. And I have found that the chronic temptation for churches is to stay behind closed doors, to hide under churchy covers, to hide from the world. And when I first arrived here at First Church 4 years ago, most everybody kind of wanted to just stay in here and stay safe. And I kept saying, no, we need to be into the community. We need to be in the community. And I think this community got more than they bargained for. And after all, I remind several people, the PR material and pictures that you all had all over the church here was me speaking at the annual Twin Cities Slut Walk addressing rape culture. So I was the kind of clergy person that was going to get out on the streets. If church stays inside its doors, that is not church. Church needs to be outside the doors. It needs to influence the world around it. The church cannot influence the world if they're hiding away within dark, confining buildings. So the challenge for those early followers of Jesus, and for us modern day followers of Jesus, because we know our culture out there is starting to feel more toxic. We're starting to experience a lot of fear and anxiety. Beyond our red doors are found all the economic, political, civil realities that occupy us on Facebook most of our waking hours, and that can be frightening. So where is God? Where is God in the darkest and most challenging of times? Where is God right now? Those disciples behind closed doors, they probably all heard that Jesus, their rabbi, had even asked a similar question from the cross, which was, my God, why have you abandoned, forsaken? Why have you given up on me? God, where are you? Now, when I really live into my fears, when I live into my questions, when I live into my doubts, this is the statement that becomes my mantra. Faith tells me that no matter what lies ahead of me, God is already there. Jesus breaks through their presumed security behind locked and closed doors, as it seems Jesus often did, as they are under their own sheets, and Jesus offers them a different kind of peace. Jesus utters softly, and I think quietly, peace be with you. To be honest, that doesn't sound very comforting to me. If I'm in the middle of some really difficult things in my life and somebody comes along and pats me on the back and says, oh, peace, James. Just be at peace. That could actually set me off. James, just be at peace. I would say, is that all you got? But the word here for shalom, the word, is a powerful word. Shalom is so much bigger than our English word peace. It actually means a complete wholeness. Prosperity, safety, health, completeness, well-being. It means harmony with God and harmony with community. It is so much bigger than the word peace. Now, if somebody would pat me on the back and say, I'm praying that you can find your place of wholeness, that you can be in a place of harmony with God and with others. If, James, you can find well-being, completeness, health, safety, and prosperity, I would say, keep on praying. Jesus was saying, by saying shalom, that God's power is not and will not and cannot be killed or silenced. No matter what kind of violence or oppression or injustice is being done to another person, that is not the final word. God's power is always and forever present, even when we have monkey mind. Lord knows I've got monkey mind. And then the story continues, and Jesus breathes on them. He breathes on them. And he breathes on them the Spirit. Take a look at this next image. Just live into that image of Jesus breathing on his fearful, timid, anxious disciples, his very own breath, the very breath of Spirit. And as you look at this next frame, take a few deep breaths and be reminded that you are breathing in the Spirit, that you are breathing in the very divine of God. And I think what's very interesting at this point, as Jesus breathes on them his Spirit, he gives them one piece of advice. He gives them one piece of advice. And he says, forgive. One piece of advice for their journey moving forward. Forgive. To err is human, to forgive is divine. I think Jesus is saying here, you scared little community of followers, forgive each other, because I'm sure they were pretty mean to each other after Jesus died and they saw it happen. I think Jesus said, even forgive those who killed me, and forgive yourself. There's a lot to forgive right now. There's a lot of broken, damaged relationships because of the world in which we live. Social media, current culture has given us so much permission to say some pretty mean and hurtful things to each other. Our world is in need of this Easter message of forgiveness when Jesus breathes Spirit and says, forgive. Daily we struggle with powers that are not making any sort of shalom. Injustice and racism and poverty and betrayal and greed and torture and lies and war, and the list goes on and on and on. To forgive, according to our tradition and our understanding, is really to give people a second chance, to give people a start over, to have a new way of being and a new way of living. The gift of forgiveness, it has possibilities. It has possibilities to create harmony, to bring unity, to bring shalom into our lives and into our society. Forgiveness gives us all opportunities to do it over again. And in fact, to do it over as many times as we need to do it over until at least we think we're getting it right, or maybe never getting it right. So let me go back to Thomas for a minute. I didn't talk much about Thomas. Good old doubting Thomas. The next slide could be offensive to some. This is the alt-right Thomas who says, he is risen. Sounds like fake news to me. But I would suggest, in the middle of this, that we forgive Thomas too. That we're awful hard on Thomas. The church has been hard on Thomas for 2,000 plus years. And we are hard on ourselves when we find those places of disbelief. Thomas was not with the others behind closed doors. I think it's because Thomas was even deeper into fear and shame and anger and anxiety, and he was isolated. He had isolated himself, and he had shut himself off from community. So I don't want to shame Thomas any more than he already shamed himself. And I think we need to release ourselves from shame and celebrate Thomas actually for his authenticity. Celebrate Thomas for his ability to live into his doubts, to live into his fears, and to live into his questions. There is a great benefit in doubt, my friends, and I liken it to this. Doubts are the ants in the pants of faith. They keep it awake and moving. Now that was from a stodgy German theologian. But isn't that the truth? Doubts are the ants in the pants of faith. They keep it awake and they keep it moving. Sometimes we think our faith keeps us in a nice, safe castle, comfortable, familiar. But what if God doesn't want us to be comfortable and safe? What if comfortable and safe means we're actually keeping the God of our own understanding at a distance from us? Doubt tears down the castle walls to force us to journey out beyond the walls and the doors. It may feel like God is far away or absent when, in fact, doubt is a gift from God to move us to grow. Doubting God is painful, it's frightening because we think we are leaving God behind, but in actuality, I think in God we doubt. We are only leaving behind the idea of God we've liked to surround ourselves with, the small God, the God we can control, the God who agrees with our understanding of God. And doubt forces us to look at who we think God is. I would encourage each of you to be Thomases today. Be Thomases for the next 40 days, but don't stop after that. Feel, name, and carry with you throughout your day your doubts, your fears, your troubles, your wounds, and surrender it all to a larger canvas of life and see what happens. For Thomas and the others, those behind locked doors, those hiding under their sheets, those who were isolated in fear, Jesus says, "Blessed are those who have not seen and yet have come to believe." Take a moment, breathe in, breathe out, realizing you are breathing in the energy of the Spirit, which I think oftentimes calls us to doubt, calls us to question, calls us beyond our current understanding of the divine into new places and new frontiers. So I'd ask that right now you just close your eyes. Put your hands in your lap upward to receive these words and take in a few deep breaths. Jesus is inviting you, through Thomas, to touch not only his wounds, but to reach into your own doubts and your own fears. To reach into the wounds and the doubts and the fears of those sitting around you. This is a community event, inside and behind our doors. This is a community celebration of our humanness and our divinity. Wounds can make us hate others and hate ourselves, or the wounds and the doubts that we hold and the fears that we hold can transform us through divine love. People will be brought together in love. We too will be brought together in love. Our doubts, your doubts, our fears, your fears, show us that we need each other. The wounds that we hold become the place of mutual compassion, become the place of the indwelling of Spirit, and can become a place of thanksgiving. Show your wounds. Reveal your doubts, your fears. Live into the journey and move out of the doors of fear into the light of love and compassion and forgiveness. Move out of the doors of fear into the light of love, compassion, and forgiveness. Please rise as you are able.